Beyond BattleCreek is a place to celebrate all that God is doing here at BattleCreek Church, behind the scenes and right in front of our eyes. My name is Karis Johnson, and I've been given the calling of finding and sharing those amazing things that God is doing in our church. As we honor stories of people knowing God, finding freedom, discovering their purpose, and making a difference, my prayer is that you would rejoice alongside us and find your place in the bigger story of the gospel. This season on Beyond BattleCreek, we're celebrating 20 years of BattleCreek Church. Whether this is your first week or you've been with us the whole 20 years, you're part of our history. This season, you'll hear stories of people who've been part of BattleCreek from the very beginning and some that have been only around for a few years. But throughout each story, you can find the common thread of God unmistakably moving in people's lives across Tulsa. BattleCreek Church is your place to know God, find freedom, discover your purpose, and make a global difference. Let's jump in. Welcome to Beyond BattleCreek. I'm here with my lovely wife, Karis, who's not only my wife, but also a very long time BattleCreek member. 19 years? Is that right?
I don't know. 2004 is when we joined. So, that's 19
years. I'm not good at math, but I think I can do that math.
Yeah.
And so,
a long time.
Yeah. So as we come up on this 20-year celebration, I would love to hear some of your opinions about how the church has changed, how you've seen it grow, but also like now looking back on 19 years, you've brought our family to BattleCreek. We did it together, but you've brought your family back to BattleCreek. What's that like to be at a church for a couple of generations now? So if you would, let's start with just kind of tell me a little bit about the beginning of your BattleCreek story.
The beginning of my BattleCreek story. I was in fourth grade, I think, is when we started coming with my little family. And I think what the weirdest thing looking back, like when you were asking how it's changed over time, the weirdest thing looking back is that we've been in the same building the entire time, except when my family joined when I was younger, there were 150 members, like from birth to the oldest adult. There were 150 people in this giant building that now we're outgrowing. It seems like all the time it's just full of people.
Yeah. So with 150 people in a huge mall, really, it still looked a lot more like a mall from the pictures in 2004. What there were still like storefronts, right?
Yeah.
And like you told me stories of like mannequins. Like
there were no mannequins, but there were like the windows where the mannequins should be. So like the kids were the mannequins often. Like I would go and stand in those windows and my parents couldn't find me, but I was just being a mannequin in the storefront. Like it looked a lot like a mall.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the question in my mind is what draws a family like yours? You guys had been in BA for, almost 10 years at that point. Mm-hmm. What drew your family to BattleCreek Church, or the church at BattleCreek at that point?
It was the church at BattleCreek.
What drew you guys there versus, maybe a more established church?
So we were at a very established church. And at the time, like it was this new church plant that my parents had connections with. Like they already knew the Hamayas from years past. I don't remember the whole story. And when Alex and Meredith came to plant this church, or I forgot the wording that they used to restart this church.
Yeah. Put it in the ground, right?
No, it wasn't. I don't think that we were part of the putting the church in the ground of killing the old church, but starting a new church, planting a new church. That was just, I think that we joined to help out. Mm-hmm. Because when a church plant is growing, that's like, you're not going to be consumers in any way. Like we weren't going to a polished church, and I don't think anybody thought that. Like we weren't going to get like the best experience. We were going to help a church grow. And even as a child, I kind of knew that. Like we weren't going to we couldn't even guarantee that we were going to be in classrooms that weren't leaking from the ceiling when it would rain.
That's a touchy subject around here.
It is because it's been like that for 20 years, except it's better now.
Yeah. We should maybe not tell our insurance agent that.
That it's better. It's better.
No, that
it was like
problem.
That. All right, I won't tell. Okay. You wanted the story of what it was like a long time ago.
That's
I'm
true.
telling you what
That's
it was
true.
like.
So, what are those conversations like you know, as a kid, you're 10 years old, you're not going to the polished, you know, there's not going to be this big stage performance. As a kid, you're going to help. Like how does that change your mentality as a kid about what church is?
It felt like I had ownership in it almost. That, I mean, what comes to mind right now is that there were no rules. Like it was awesome.
Yeah, I believe that you thought that was very awesome
Yes,
as a kid.
it was. I think that I learned a lot about like going with the flow of it, that there was just, I don't know, there were no rules. We had, like, things changed frequently. I remember when we went from one service to two services, which is interesting, like just this year going from 2 to 3 again. We've done this before, but doing that again. Like I remember when we went from 1 to 2, and it was like, all right, we're just going with it. Like we didn't have the, from what I remember, like it wasn't the environment of the stuck up church people of like, nah, we're never gonna do this. This has never been like this. We're not gonna change things.
Yeah.
Like the story that I remember of BattleCreek over the years is like, we're gonna just try this new thing and we're gonna go for it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's still true. Even with as big of a church as it is, it's like we're just gonna pivot. We're gonna be flexible and try a new thing. And that's how I've always remembered it.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna try.
I mean, what were some of those new things that you tried besides, I mean, going from 1 to 2 services? And again, like as a kid, like what do you remember about why the church was doing that?
I remember, so with going from 1 to 2 services, I know you said other than that, but like with that, it was, I remember conversations about like, well, what are we going to do with the kids that are staying for 2 services? Are we going to give them the same experience twice? And like it was a small group of kids even then, which is interesting. It actually was probably all of us, because everyone was there to help out. So we were all staying so we could serve. And so we were called the leadership kids.
Okay.
And like, well,
a
what
crown that you love to wear.
I was born with that crown. It's a leadership kid. And I forgot what your question was.
So what was the why behind it for you guys as kids?
Oh, yeah. So it was, and I've heard Meredith even say this recently of like, the why behind it was so that you didn't have to choose between, so the adults, because I was a kid, the adults didn't have to choose between serving and going to church. It wasn't like this 12-week rotation or this however many week rotation of serving in the nursery. It's like every Sunday you come an hour, you serve an hour. Like I thought that's how all churches did it, because that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
I had the same teachers every week.
That's huge.
Yeah, it is huge. And I still talk to most of them.
Yeah.
Like
we talked to Miss Donna this weekend.
We talked to Miss Donna Abbott. Like we talked to her about her grandkids. Like, it's always been that way. And that's what I think was really cool about starting with a church. So not just that I was so young, but that the church was so young, is that I was a part of those conversations. I learned the DNA of the church as a child of we're doing this so that the adults, so that you can have the same teachers every week. And so that the adults can come an hour and serve an hour. And so I saw my parents do that. I saw my parents come an hour and serve an hour. Yeah. I served with them. It was just, I feel like I was on board with the why, which is very important to me, as my personality is like, don't just tell me what the rules are, tell me why the rules exist. And
there were no rules.
There were no rules, but when they gave us rules, I needed to agree with them. Sure. As a 10-year-old, I needed to be part of the decision making of this church.
So as you entered into like your preteen years, that's when like your family went through a really, really big change. Yeah. And that's when, at least as I understand it, like things really started to get real for you as far as your faith, and the role that the church played in your life started to grow even more. So tell me a little bit about what happened and how that impacted you.
So around that time, 7th, 8th grade, I think, is when, so my parents got divorced. And so now this church that we started going to as like a family unit, like now things were shifting big time in our life at home. And so I was in, I think it was the summer after I finished 7th grade. So I was in youth, and I had the same youth pastor through most of my time in student ministry.
Yeah. John Hickman,
who was the officiant at our wedding.
Yeah.
Even we still talk to him.
Love John.
And during this time, they were aware of what was going on in our family, and they actually reached out to me once they knew that I knew what was happening. And they really took me in. They took on a role, I feel like a second parenting role for me, a role of stability in my life. Not just at church, but like I spent a lot of time at their house.
Yeah.
Because
they had young kids, right? And you were watching
their
kids. They
didn't have any kids yet.
Oh, okay.
So I was their first.
Yeah.
And I still will take on that role as their oldest child. But then they had kids, and I was very much a part of their family. And so during that time, like I grew up, my mom was a stay-at-home mom for a long time until my parents got divorced. And then all of a sudden, like that was a huge shift in my life as my mom is going to work full time. And now, like coming home from school at the end of the day, nobody's there. It's just me and my siblings. And that was really weird and really hard. And because of the school that I went to, and because rules were a lot more lax back then, I could choose to ride a different bus home. And so I would ride the bus that went to BattleCreek neighborhoods. Yeah. And they would drop off at the BattleCreek, I don't know, the apartments behind the church. Yeah. And I would just ride the bus and get off at that stop, and then I would go to the church every day. Well, Monday through Thursday. Yeah. And I would hang out in in the youth offices. I don't know how much they loved it, but I did it anyway. I was helpful. I wasn't just going to play games.
Yeah. What kind of things were you doing?
Administrative stuff. I would do paperwork or anything to get ready for events. I would do packets of things. I don't remember everything that I did, but I just had that was my safe place. The church became a really safe place for me. It was a place that I felt at home, and I was around people who that part of my life was very stable. That was a part of my life that I could count on. Yeah. Being a place, and it wasn't it wasn't just John. There were all of the youth staff at the time. They were my family. They were my people, and the church was a home that I could go to, which was just really cool. It played a really important role in my life for sure during that season. Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine who you would be without that, because we met, just after high school, we met within the first couple of months of college. And for me, I met this young woman who was not only beautiful, but, was very well discipled, you just had this understanding of not even just the scriptures, which you did, understand the Bible very well, but you had an understanding of this is how life works. This is how this is what it looks like to walk out your faith with wisdom, and you didn't just come up with that; you had been taught that. And so that immediately for me was oh wow, she has had a lot of people invest in her life. And one of the things you didn't mention that I feel it's a constant conversation or a running joke for us is all the small group leaders that you've had that just invested so much in you. I feel every time you're on the phone with a woman who's 10 to 20 years older than us, it's that was one of my small group leaders. Yep. And here we are in our late 20s, and they're checking in on you, and they're catching up with you on Facebook and things like that. All of that investment. It's not even just staff people, but also volunteers who just loved you as a teenager, and not even just you, and I get to see it from you, but I know that all those small groups are still tight knit.
Well, and I think that started I can see the seed that was planted when we went to 2 services. Way like 2005, I think is probably when that happened. When like the culture and the DNA of BattleCreek is serving, is like just the consistency there. Like that was the expectation. And so the small group leaders that poured into my life through that whole time, like they were consistent in my life. They really, they discipled me well, and they were, I saw them every single week. Like they weren't just on a rotation. They weren't just showing up to fill in a spot. Like they actually, and now I know that you're probably going to ask me about this, but now I get to see that with our kids.
Yeah.
Like I see volunteers, like even on this past Sunday, was that yesterday?
Yeah.
On this past Sunday, when we dropped Arlo, our youngest, off, she was actually a teenager in the room who was like, I used to be in Herschel's class, and now I get to be in Arlo's class. Like we're seeing the same consistent leaders.
Both of our boys.
Yeah, for all of our kids.
Yeah.
And like I'm seeing them start to experience what I experienced growing up. Like the same, and some of them, like Miss Donna, Miss Donna was never my teacher growing up, but she was my little sister's teacher.
Yeah.
And I served with Miss Donna in the preschool classes, and now she's been in classes with all of our kids. And it's really cool.
It's amazing. Yeah. So you and I, we met at school, and was blown away by your church experience. Vastly different from mine growing up. And not that I had a bad one, just extremely different. And we would come and visit, because it was so different, I had a hard time sometimes. But we moved to Tulsa, and I was on staff at another church here in town. And then I had a career change and started teaching for a little while. And we started talking about, well, where are we going to go to church? And we were determined not to go to BattleCreek.
I said not BattleCreek.
Yeah, why? It's been a few years. Tell me what your thoughts were.
So some of that was just that I like had this resistance to bring you into my hometown. So like some of that was just I didn't want to do that just because like, well, this is what's easy. Let's just go to my church.
Right.
I wanted us to find a place for our family that really checked all the boxes. And so we looked into that. And also I had this like perfectly preserved memory of my childhood church.
Yeah.
It was this like, I mean, everything that I've said up until now, like this place that was so important to me and that shaped so many areas of my life. I didn't want to ruin it. Like I had this weird fear that we were going to come back to BattleCreek and you weren't going to like it as much as I did. And you were going to see it through a different lens, and you were going to critique it, or you were going to come back and somehow what I loved and was so important to me was going to be like shattered. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep it like perfectly preserved. And so there were just kind of, I don't know if I could have named that at the time, but now looking back, that was my fears. I didn't want new eyes on it. Like I wanted to leave it where it was, and I loved it, and I wanted to find somewhere that felt like we searched for a church and found a church home. Yeah. Which is what we ended up doing. Yeah. I just didn't think that it would be here.
I feel like we tried every other church in Tulsa before we came to BattleCreek.
Oh, yeah.
And then your mom said, hey, if you guys will come to church at BattleCreek, then I'll buy you lunch afterward. And we got lured in.
Yeah. We had no money. And so any free meal we were offered, we took her up on it. But we had to go to BattleCreek in order to get the free meal.
Yeah, that teacher's salary was not paying for the whole family's lunch not. After church.
It was nice.
Yeah. So what I feel like I found with that though is like you were talking about like finding a church that checked all these boxes. What for both of us is, BattleCreek made the boxes.
Yeah. Right.
Like that
That's
was
a really
the
good
list.
way to put it. That's the reason my checklist existed, was because I grew up, I wanted to not go to BattleCreek, but I needed it to check all the same boxes that BattleCreek created for a church experience for me.
Yeah. And even though I had never been at BattleCreek full time, like I had seen the way that it shaped you, and I wanted that for our family.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, when we came, we had, she was what, 1, maybe 2, our oldest, Evelyn.
I think like 18 months.
Okay, yeah, almost 2 years old. We had a foster daughter at the time. A much smaller family than we do now, it feels like, in some ways.
Not much smaller. We had 2 kids and I was pregnant.
That's fair. But for me, like that was impossible to overlook as part of like our decision-making process.
Our family.
Yeah. And so for you, like, what was it like, picking a church or feeling called to a church that you had grown up in for our kids?
I wanted the same experience for them. I wanted them to have consistent teachers. I wanted them to not just be babysat on a Sunday morning. As much as I would have loved that, like that would have been fine to just drop my kids off so that I could like have some time.
Yeah. And we saw that at a few churches that we tried.
Yeah.
It was very much just babysitting.
It was babysitting.
Yeah.
And like that really is sometimes sufficient.
Sure.
Of when I need time alone, time away from my kids.
Yeah, to go worship.
And to be like, and to hear a message and to be able to like focus on something other than my kids. Like that would have been sufficient. I wanted to partner. I wanted a church that was going to partner alongside me in raising my kids to love the Lord. I know that is my role as a mom, and I do take that role very seriously. I know that we both do in parenting our kids, but I wanted a church that was going to not underestimate my kids. Like Evelyn was young, and she was still learning about the Bible. She was learning scripture. She was learning songs. She was being told stories. And like sometimes even, so Evelyn is almost 6 now. She's in kindergarten. And sometimes like she comes home and like the theology that she has developed now, I'm like, dang, girl.
Yeah.
Like she'll tell me things and I'm like, how did you know that? Yeah. Where did you learn that?
Well, I have a degree in biblical studies and I'm like, okay, Evelyn, you got to slow down a little bit. Like they're teaching y'all young now.
Yeah. Well, she comes and talks to me and I'm like, go talk to daddy. I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah. And like she can hang with you on some of those conversations. But that is what I wanted in a church. Like I wanted, I wanted her to be pastored. And she is, and then all of the other kids that we've fostered and now like have as our own kids, like that was a weird way to say that. I gave birth to the other 2.
Yeah, you gave birth to the other. I gave
birth to all of our kids that we have right now.
Yeah.
So I just wanted a church to come alongside us. Like that was a huge box that needed to be checked off.
Yeah, and I think that, that's probably got to be one of the biggest fears when you're a children's pastor, children's minister, especially like preschool age is, am I shooting over the head of these kids? And I love the way you put that of like, don't underestimate what kids can retain. Yeah. Because we've seen that. And like, that was one of the things that immediately began to change in our home when we started coming here was Evelyn was so attuned to what she was learning. Like she was quoting memory verses on Friday after having learned it the last Sunday. She was talking about Bible stories and things like that were shocking to me that she could retain all of that information. But it was just that. Like I felt like she was not underestimated. Like they knew what she was capable of understanding, and they, gave her the scriptures. They gave her the Bible. So one of the questions that when I think about your story of going to BattleCreek, leaving and coming back with a family, that I think in my mind, someone listening is probably in a similar situation, maybe at our church, maybe at a different church, because it wasn't all rosy, it wasn't all perfect that you had memories of. And then there was also this element of, is it going to ruin my good memories if we go back? What would you say to someone who's wrestling with that of like, I have this community, this church that I love, or maybe I have some difficult memories with maybe. What advice would you give to someone that is thinking about going back to the church that they grew up in?
Any church or BattleCreek?
Any church and or BattleCreek.
I don't really know. I don't know how to answer that.
Okay.
I mean, we really, I guess just what we ended up doing is we looked at all of the boxes that needed to be filled that were important to us.
Yeah.
And not, like, I say that, and I know that some people are like, church isn't for you. It's for God. And yes,
For
that's
sure.
why the church exists.
Yeah.
I understand that. But like the boxes that we needed filled were community groups that met in homes.
Yeah.
Gosh, what were some of the other ones? Like there were important things on our list.
Yeah. We were fostering at the time, and so we
Yes.
needed a church that supported foster care.
Yes. And not just like, yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
And not even like, yeah, here's some money. Like I needed someone to watch my kids for me so we could.
Well, that's
go on
what
a
was
date.
crazy is we were at another church and a BattleCreek family was partnering with us to help us raise our foster child.
Yes.
Um,
They watched her for free while I could go to work.
yeah. And the only connection is that you had gone to BattleCreek before, and they were currently at BattleCreek.
Yep.
That's the only connection we had.
Yep, because it's so ingrained in the DNA of the
Yeah.
church. But that was an important thing for me. Like I guess what I had to do in going back to BattleCreek was that I needed to evaluate it from the standpoint not of just going back home, but like, would I choose this church as an adult?
Wow. Yeah.
Because that's the situation that we were in. Like we needed to really choose a church for our family. And we tried several churches, and we were even told by a church that you were on staff with that it was not the desire of the congregation to meet in homes as groups. That was a red flag for us.
Yeah.
That's biblical to meet in people's homes and not just in a classroom on a Sunday morning. Like that was a really big deal. And so as an adult, as a parent, raising our family, like we needed to make sure that this was really a church that we were comfortable raising our family in, and that it wasn't just a sentimental, emotional decision. It was like, really, this is the place that we need to be at. And so that, I guess that would be the advice that I would give is like really evaluate it, like remove yourself from the memories of like, this is what I grew up with, but like, is this where I want my kids to grow up? Is this where I want our family to plant roots in? Do we really align with everything that this church stands for?
Yeah.
And all of like the memories were kind of a bonus. So like we got to go back, and now it's like I see my kids running up and down the ramps.
Yeah.
And like when we stay after church is over and there's not as many people out there, like they're rolling down the ramps. I'm like, I did that when I was a kid too, because there were no rules, except I didn't have to wait till everybody was gone because there was nobody there.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. That's what I would say.
Yeah. All right.
Evaluate it
I'm
differently.
going to give you maybe a tough question. Maybe
The
not.
last one was kind of tough.
Okay, good. What do you think is the most important change that our church has made in the 19 years that you've been a part of it?
There have been so many changes. So many changes. What is the most important change?
Yeah.
I feel like a broken record on some of this, but okay. This is not a direct answer to your question. But the most important change is the willingness to change.
Okay.
BattleCreek doesn't stay stuck in something. Like we just went to 3 services because somebody or multiple somebodies or whatever looked at what was going on and says, this isn't working. What can we do?
Yeah.
And that is a constant at the church. Over 19 years, that has been a constant. Like, this isn't working. What are we going to do about it? It's not like we did. I don't know. Like, we weren't content with turning people away if you didn't get there 15 minutes early.
Right.
Like, that's not going to work. Like, how are we going to reach people for the gospel if we're turning people away because they weren't early enough to church?
Yeah.
Like, that can be such a turnoff for a new family to try this new church or to try a church for the first time ever. Like, well, I didn't get here. They didn't have any seats for me. This is clearly not the place for me. So looking at that and saying, that's not good enough. We're going to change it.
Yeah.
So I think just the willingness to change things over the year of like, okay, well, the student, there have been the youth room, student center, whatever it's been called, all of the things over the years.
Yeah.
It has changed locations so many times.
Yeah.
The worship center, like the adult worship center, has changed locations once. But just the willingness to look at it and say, this doesn't work. What are we going to do?
Sure.
Has been really cool.
Yeah.
It really fits in my personality, and I think that's why I like it, is that I'm constantly looking for change. I'm like, this isn't working. What are we going to do about it? So I would say that I'm going to ask you the same question. Like, what stories have I told?
Turn the tables. Okay.
Like, what do you think? Like, what of the stories that I've told, what changes have stood out to you?
Man, well, as someone who doesn't love change, I actually do prefer to be routine, and change is a little frightening for me at times. The changes can be a little jarring at times around here. Working at the church now, especially working at the BA campus, it's a little bit like a Hogwarts staircase from Harry Potter.
You're talking to me like I have ever watched or read.
Yeah, I know. You were secluded as a kid from those things.
I grew up Baptist. I wasn't allowed to read Harry Potter.
Well, you should read them sometime. It'll make your day, babe. But things just change all the time, you know. And like you'll open a closet and it's somebody's office now. It's like, oh my goodness, sorry. Yep. Or like you'll go and turn a corner. It's like, oh, they put a wall here. What in the world? And like things are just constantly changing and under construction at our church. But that's exciting, you know. I was talking to at the South Tulsa campus. I was talking to Brad Wosner, and he, you know, operates a furniture store here in town, and he was talking about how the South Tulsa campus has kind of blown up with the construction that they have going on this year with the new kids building. And he said, you know, there's something about people, their interest gets piqued when they see the you know, the construction signs going on. And he was saying they did some construction at the store recently, and people walk by like, oh, I just want to see what's going on. Yeah. And while I'm here, I'll buy some furniture, you know. And it's, you know, the same is kind of true for our church. Is like we've kind of constantly got something going on at one of our 6 campuses, and people get their interest piqued. They love it. They want to know what's going to happen next.
Well, and I think all of those changes, like, they're never flippant changes. They're never for no reason. It's always like at the South Tulsa campus. It's like we've got a lot of kids and nowhere to put them. So let's build a building so that we can fill it. Yeah.
And let's do it right.
Yeah. Like everything I think of at the Broken Arrow campus, the North Hall. Did you know that? Well, you probably know this, but like growing up, it was very important to know the direction of each hall, like the North Hall, the South Hall. The West Hall wasn't really, it's funny because that's kind of the most important hall. That's where the worship center is now. But like nobody talked about the West Hall.
Oh, that's funny.
Anyway, that was not an important detail. But like the North Hall where the kids are, it is like well designed. It's really pretty, and like it shows what's important to our church is children. Yeah. And the same thing with every area that is redone. It says this is important to our church. Yeah. Like this group is important to our church. A new worship center, like this is important to us. Like all of the changes reflect, I feel like, the heart of our church. Absolutely. And so like that's just really cool to me.
Yeah, I love that.
It piques the interest and it just shows it's important.
Yeah. we show what we value around here by what we build.
Yeah.
Big time. So a couple of years ago, this is after COVID even.
Yes.
We found out that the building had flooded, the BA building had flooded.
Yeah.
And we were going to be displaced essentially indefinitely was the first news. What were your thoughts? Like, what ran through your head?
So it was abrupt too. Like, I'm pretty sure we found out during the week that, hey, by the way, on Sunday, we're not going to be, I think the first Sunday it was like BA campus, it's online. Yeah. We had nowhere to go. Yeah. And then indefinitely we're going to be somewhere. We didn't even know at first where we were going to be. I feel like I took it a lot harder than a lot of people did. Well, than you did even. You were like, oh man, this is a bummer. You weren't on staff yet, so it didn't actually affect your day to day. You were like, okay.
It's like, oh, just go to another campus. No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. And we did. I think we went to Midtown one day. It was awesome to have other campuses.
Yeah.
It was devastating. And I know that sounds dramatic. Because it didn't even feel like because it was indefinite. Yeah. And the first conversations that came out of it were, we don't know if this building is salvageable even. Ugh. Like, we don't know, like, they were moving everything out of every room of the whole campus. Because I had created such a safe place there growing up, I could cry thinking about it. Like, I thought this building means so much to me. And I know all of the cliches, like the church is not a building, it's the people. That building meant so much to me. And I thought, if I'm about to lose this building, like it felt, this is a lot more emotional than I wanted to be. It felt like a loss. I felt like I was losing something very, very important to me. Yeah. Because it was where I grew up. It's where I went when I felt like my life was falling apart. It meant so much stability to me. And I, around this time, like while we were out of the building, I talked to Meredith Hamaya about it. And we actually did cry about it because she was like, yeah, she felt the same way. It wasn't just a building. It was where like so much of my life that I could remember took place in that building. It is where I like really met Jesus. Yeah. I was a Christian before we started coming to BattleCreek. But it was during that time that, like, as a teenager, that my faith really became my own. I had so many encounters with Jesus. I had hard conversations in that building. I had cried so much in that building and laughed. And, like, that was where I brought people to, like, that was my place. Yeah. And so when we were out of it we weren't even out of it for that long. It was just a couple of months. I feel like we were out for like August and September. Yeah. I think. A
lot shorter than we initially thought.
A lot shorter than we thought, yes. But it was a loss, is what it felt like to me. And the first Sunday being back, everyone was like, yay, we're back. And I wanted to weep. And I probably did. I think I did. I was so grateful to walk back through those halls and feel like, okay, I'm not losing my home. It felt like I was losing my home for a little bit. It was a really big deal to be back and and it was almost, this is a weird part of it. It was sentimental to me, that like all of the years of having buckets in the hallways to catch the water. Yeah. It was like, oh man, that finally caught up to us. Like, we actually need a new roof. Why didn't we do this a long time ago? Right. I wasn't in charge though. And like even growing up, the rooms in the preschool and the kids areas, like the latex paint would bubble because the water was leaking through the walls. And like we all knew it and we all kind of wanted to pop it, but it was like, we're just going to pretend this problem doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And then it did cause a whole bunch more problems.
Again, don't call our insurance agent. I hope they're not listening to this.
It's all past now.
Yeah, it's all good now.
But yeah, it was really hard when I thought that we weren't going to have that building anymore. It would have been fine. Like we would have found a different building and whatever, but like I think for a while it was deemed unsafe to walk in. Mm-hmm. Like I couldn't even go and say goodbye.
Man.
And that was hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to think about losing that building. But I'm glad that we were back.
We're back.
We've been back for a while.
Yeah.
But
it's been a minute.
It was good to actually go back to know that I wasn't going to lose it. Yeah. It meant a lot to me.
Well, Karis, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I'll see you later.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in to Beyond BattleCreek. If you liked what you heard today, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share so that we can continue to do projects like this. Thanks so much. See you next time.